Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Fisher, and as director of the Ohio University School of Music, it's my pleasure to welcome you today to our virtual conversation on the topics of arts engagement, audience building, fundraising and patron development, and equity in the arts. Before we begin, Dr. James would like to make a quick announcement to those who are joining us today for the PL.
Welcome MUS 1090 students. Enjoy today's presentation. These are incredible alumni. At 1:45, as always, hop over to Blackboard. You can take your mini quiz. If for some reason the presentation is continuing, take the mini quiz, come back, and you might be able to participate in some of the back and forth that's happening at the end. So enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. James. Well, it's an honor to introduce our panelists, all three of whom are distinguished alums of the Ohio University School of Music. Our first speaker today is Kathleen Dean. Kathleen completed her undergraduate degrees in music education and music theory from Ohio University in 2010. She currently serves as executive assistant to the general director of the Washington National Opera at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. Eric McMillan is a 2018 alum of the Ohio University School of Music and Honors Tutorial College. He is currently the Acquisition Marketing Associate at the New York City Ballet in New York City. And Almi Shearson completed her BA in 2019 as an HTC music student as well. She is the Equity in Arts Leadership Program Associate at Americans for the Arts in New York City. So I want to publicly thank each of our panelists for taking the time out of your busy schedules to share your expertise and experiences with us all today. I know we will all come away inspired and challenged by what we are about to hear. Students and audience who are joining us, if you have questions, please feel free to share these to the School of Music Facebook page post for this presentation. That is live now on the School of Music Facebook page. If there's time at the end, we'll ask our panelists to address those questions that you have. So without further ado, please join me from wherever you're tuning in to welcome our distinguished panelists. Kathleen.
Yes. Hello, everyone. It is great to be with you all. I am joining you all virtually, of course, from just outside of Washington, D.C., but just wanted to start off with a bit more about me. So as Dr. Fisher mentioned, I graduated in 2010 and then went and completed my master's degree at Carnegie Mellon University in arts management. And when I was there, it really kind of solidified my path in the not-for-profit arts world. So that is what I have been doing ever since. So I started off my career working in Pittsburgh for a small not-for-profit arts education organization, moved to St. Louis, Missouri in 2015 and got a job working for another arts education not-for-profit there. And it was at that organization which I began my path in development or fundraising, which I'll tell you a little bit more about here in a second. My husband and my husband's also an OU graduate. He's a trombone player, if you can tell by all the trombones behind me with the Air Force Band. But he won a gig here in DC in 2018, so we moved here. I continued working for my St. Louis organization for a bit, but then decided it was time to jump into the DC arts scene. So I worked for a small DC performing arts organization, and then about a year ago, got my current job as executive assistant to the general director at Washington National Opera. And Washington National Opera is underneath the umbrella of the Kennedy Center. So we are an affiliate organization of the Kennedy Center. But for the past 5 or 6 years or so, I've been working as a fundraiser. So I have experience in grant writing with corporate and foundation fundraising and also with individual fundraising and kind of running the full gamut. My position now, serving as executive assistant to the general director, I'm basically the general director's right-hand person. So whatever the general director is doing that day, I am also doing that day. So is it fundraising? Is it marketing? Is it PR? Is it donor communication? Is it artistic things? I've gotten to know the opera world a whole lot better just within the past year. I'm a saxophonist, had no exposure with the opera world prior to starting this job. So it has been a very, very interesting learning experience for me. I wanted to start things off, though, since I'm going to be talking about the not-for-profit world, with just a brief explanation about how not-for-profit organizations function and what the role of fundraising is within a not-for-profit organization. So I'll be using the opera pretty frequently as an example, because that's what I know best at the moment. So when you think about the budget for a not-for-profit organization, when you think about expenses on that budget, those are the things that you're paying money for. So you're paying staff, you're paying the orchestra, you're paying the singers, set, costumes, et cetera, et cetera. So in order to balance out those expenses, you need revenue. In the not-for-profit world, there are two forms of revenue, and this is a bit of an oversimplification, but two main forms of revenue. The first is earned revenue, and earned revenue is anything that people out there in the community buy and then expect to get something in return. So a few examples of that might be tickets, parking, merchandise, t-shirts, tote bags, whatever. So you buy a ticket and then you get to go to a performance. You pay for a tote bag and you get the tote bag. So that is earned revenue. The other side of the coin with revenue is called contributed revenue. And this is what sets a not-for-profit apart from a different type of corporation. Contributed revenue is money that people or corporations or foundations give to a not-for-profit organization. And there is a special tax break that people get when they donate to a not-for-profit organization. But that is the other way that a not-for-profit makes money. So I just want you to keep that in your mind, that most not-for-profits function with a mix of earned revenue and contributed revenue. So Dr. Fisher shared with us a couple questions that people had asked prior to the session. And one of those was, can you give us an example of a fundraiser you've done? And while, yes, I could give you an example of a fundraiser that I've been a part of or that my organizations have done, but I want to emphasize that for a lot of not-for-profit organizations, fundraising is a year-long job. Because we have to raise that contributed revenue, there are frequently full-time staff members who work for not-for-profit organizations who are responsible for raising money. So it's not just like a one-off, you're having a special event. Instead, it is a constant thing that's happening. And speaking a little bit in generalizations, but all organizations have to do this. I would be really curious to hear from Eric and Ami if they have other examples here of organizations that miraculously don't have to raise money to balance their budgets out. But I would say by far and away, this is just something that not-for-profit arts organizations have to do. So it is just important to kind of think about fundraising as an actual year-long sort of thing and something that people make their careers in. So this is something that I've been doing for my career for the past 5 or 6 years or so. So I know we're here to talk about audience engagement today, and I wanted to approach the audience engagement side of things from the fundraising perspective because that is what my own experience is. And it is just critical to understand how important audience engagement is as a function of fundraising. So if you think about people who support arts organizations, they generally support the arts organizations because they are interested in what the organization is doing or the product that the organization is creating. So for the opera, the people who come to the opera or buy tickets to the opera are doing so because they are interested in opera. The people that are donating to the opera are doing so because they are interested in opera. There's some organizations that this isn't always the case, that your audience members aren't your donors. Think, for example, like a food bank. So with a food bank, the people who are coming to use the food bank are not the ones who are typically not the ones who are making donations to the food bank. So, or like an arts education organization. So you may have donors who are donating to an arts education organization, but aren't actually taking advantage of like the classes that are designed for elementary school children, but they understand and recognize the importance of that sort of work. So for the opera, because so many of our donors are specifically interested in the art form, it's a real opportunity for us to use our art form as a way to engage those donors further and engage them as audience members to make sure that they keep coming back to performances, but they also help us on the contributed revenue side of things. So there are a number of ways to do this and to make sure that our donors are engaged in what we're doing. And I would love to hear further from Ami and Eric about how you all do this work in your organizations. But it can be big things like inviting donors to events that happen after performances to make sure that they come to the performance and then they're treated very special, that they get, a glass of champagne after the performance or a special little snack, or that they get to do an artist meet and greet. So creating those special experiences that make people feel really engaged in the work that we're doing and like that they understand what's going on. But it's also important to remember that audience engagement or donor engagement is not the same across the spectrum. So for some folks, meeting an artist or having that glass of champagne after the performance is like the best thing. Like, yes, sign me up for that. I would love to do that. For some people though, they're not interested in that. And they would like to be engaged with the organization a different way. So it's important to know your donors and know how they want to be engaged with your organization. Perhaps a donor is not a very social person and they want to go to the performance, but they want to leave right afterwards and not socialize with anyone. That's fine. Perhaps following up with that person with a note from the general director or the artistic director, or figuring out a different way to contact that person and bring them into the loop would be the best way to engage that person. Another thing to think about in terms of fundraising and audience engagement is it's not always individuals who are giving money to not-for-profit arts organizations. I could talk about this all day, but a couple other entities that might do this would be a foundation. So foundations are organizations that are basically created to give money away to not-for-profit organizations. Corporations give money to arts organizations, and there's also public funding available for arts organizations. So the best known probably one is the National Endowment for the Arts, which is a federally funded kind of entity that grants money to organizations or grants money to small organizations that then grant the money out. So the strategies for engaging those sorts of entities who are giving your organization money are slightly different than engaging a donor who we know, this one donor we know really well. Eric loves to come to the opera and loves Italian composers. So like, I know when we have an Italian opera that I'm definitely calling Eric, and he loved the champagne after the performance. So we're definitely inviting to that. But Ami is not at all interested in that. So how do you do that with a corporation who's giving you money or a public entity that's giving you money? So you have to adjust your strategy a little bit and figure out what is going to be interesting to that corporation. Maybe they're not looking for tickets to the show, but they are looking for their name to be on the program book. Maybe they're not looking for their name to be on the program book, but they do want a table set up out front with some of their merchandise that they can give away for free. So you really have to customize the experience for each of your donors, each of your donor audience members, to figure out what it is that's going to be the draw for them to keep them coming back for more. So we, of course, are in kind of crazy times now with the pandemic, with COVID. And it has been quite difficult for arts organizations in this time in particular. So I want you to remember back for a second to the budget model that I talked about earlier. So not-for-profits make their money by earned revenue, ticket sales, and by contributed revenue. We're in the middle of a pandemic. There is no performances happening. There is no earned revenue happening right now, which means that for many organizations, we are entirely reliant at the moment on the generosity of individuals, corporations, foundations, public funding at this point in time. And so it has just been, as the months have progressed and are getting a clearer and clearer yet somehow muddier picture of how the next couple months, year will go, it is just becoming increasingly important to engage our donors and to figure out how we can continue doing that. And in order to do this, organizations have to be really nimble. They have to be really fast on their feet to be able to think about how, okay, we're not producing opera on the main stage. We're not actually allowed to do that with the regulations in Washington, D.C. right now. So what are some of the ways that we can keep talking to donors, that we can keep them in our family, feeling connected, feeling like they're a part of our audience? So a couple different ways we're doing that. Our development department is teamed up with our board of trustees. We're making thank you calls to everyone who has donated the value of their canceled performance back to us. Our orchestra are making happy birthday messages that we're sending out to our donors and out to our patrons. We're also starting like small scale performance opportunities. So just this week, we started something called the pop-up opera truck, which is really exciting. It's like actually a box truck that has a piano on it. And we're driving to different locations throughout the region. And you open the side of the truck and the pianist is there. And then we have two singers who are part of our young artists program. And everything is appropriately socially distanced and sanitized and all of those sorts of things. But we are able to be out in the community then and presenting music. And our donors and our audience love this because it's a way for them to keep connected with the music and keep connected with the program in a way that they haven't been able to do since we canceled all of our performances this past March. And the more that organizations can do this during this time to remain connected, to remain relevant with their audience members, the better it is. Because when you feel connected, when you feel like you understand what's going on, you're more willing to support an organization. And frankly, we need the support of people right now. Because if we lose this stream, this contributed revenue side of things, we're dead in the water. We won't have money to pay artists. We don't have money to pay staff. We don't have money to keep the institution alive. So it's just critically important to think about how we're maintaining that engagement of our audience, of our donors during this COVID period. Okay, I think I'm just about up on time. I know I just talked a lot. So if you have any questions for me, please feel free to go into the chat on the Facebook page and I can answer them there, or can answer any questions during the Q&A at the end of this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathleen. So my name is Eric McMillan. I'm the Acquisition Marketing Associate at New York City Ballet. So with my time, I'm going to be more focusing on the marketing aspect rather than fundraising, but Kathleen gave an excellent explanation of how fundraising works in a large arts organization. Generally, it's under the term of the development department. And that is, I mean, especially at a Lincoln Center organization, it is a beast of a department. I mean, we're talking about, you know, a corporate sponsorship team, individual giving, major gifts department. It's a large thing. It's well-oiled because they do bring in a significant portion of revenue. But moving on to more of the marketing, sorry, my cat's about to jump up on my lap. So if you see me kind of pushing that way, that's what's happening. But moving more on to a marketing standpoint, to kind of give you an idea of how my department is shaped. We have a relatively large department considering the size of our organization. I'm in acquisition marketing, so we would call that the top of the funnel. So we are working with people that are less engaged with the ballet. So think about people that maybe have never been, have considered it, or generally like single ticket buyers. So people that maybe come once or twice a year to random ballets. This moves on to our more engaged patrons, which are our relationship marketing. So this is going to be people that come more often. So maybe still a single ticket buyer, but you know, are generally more apt to come throughout the year. And then our subscribers, which are a big portion of ticket sales, since they are buying anywhere between like 3 performances per season up to like a complete season. So that does make up a pretty generous amount of ticket revenue. So as I said, we are mainly dealing with people that are less engaged, but generally the people that come to New York City Ballet are pretty avid ballet goers. We're pretty long-standing company in the United States. Most people that I come would say know the dancers they want to see, they know the casts, they know the performances, and they're very interested in these kinds of aspects of performance. So a lot of our regular ballet goers are very into the ballet. But for those that aren't, we have new ways to introduce them. So my team specifically has a couple of initiatives that kind of help with this audience building. So first thing I want to talk about is our 30 for 30 program. So these are $30 tickets, excuse me, $30 tickets for those that are 30 or under. So this is a program that we just took online where you are able to reserve tickets the week of, if you are under 30 years of age, for $30 to, I would say probably like 95% of our performances that week. So you can see the same repertoire, and it's not like, I mean, we put these seats all throughout the house. So it's, you know, a regular seat, all for $30, which is a great value proposition considering the cost of our seats can go all the way up to like $200 for some of the higher end seats. And I mean, especially if you look at like other Lincoln Center organizations, excuse me, that's my cat. He's a little angry that he's not getting attention right now, but like say for the Met, I mean, you could be spending up to $500 on a seat, which is pretty crazy. And that, you know, I mean, especially for Lincoln Center campus organizations, that's a pretty big barrier, is the price alone. We are, I mean, considerably, like all the organizations on our campus are kind of the top of the game, and the price does reflect that, but we do have these kind of value options that are still fantastic. And we try to do that so we're engaging a younger audience who, and 30 for 30 is mainly geared towards audiences that are a little more familiar with ballet, but maybe they're coming out of like college, or maybe are young professionals that are interested in ballet. So they already have an idea. The next one I want to talk about is our art series performances, which are kind of interesting. It kind of goes into programming and kind of the experience that we provide after the performance. So art series is where we, 3 performances in the winter. We invite a visual artist to come and do an exhibit, which will be displayed on our promenade. So we have open hours where people can come in for free and view the installation. Usually, I mean, we give them pretty much free range with the artist, that is, with what they want to do. So it can be kind of ballet centric, but mostly it kind of like revolves around that. This latest example of last year in February, the artist was an illustrator, and she did portraits of everyone working behind the scenes. So I actually got my own portrait done on plexiglass, and I was able to keep it. It's very large, and I can't show it right now, but it was a really interesting exhibit. But all of the tickets are $35, every ticket in the house. And then afterwards, we have a DJ, and there's free beer, and we actually got whiskey this time. So free alcohol, which is a great proposition. It's mainly about creating an experience. So we're trying to get a lot of people that are interested in the visual artists. So we do a lot of collaboration. Maybe they'll like kind of announce us on Instagram, on their own Instagram. And so we get a little bit of crossover, but we do notice that we have a lot of people that are strictly into art series. Maybe they're not coming into other performances. I mean, we try to, this is kind of like a way to get people into other performances, but we see people that are mainly interested in art series because it is more of an experience. There's a lot more value added considering what you're paying for it. And on top of that, like another, I guess the biggest way we try to build new audiences is through targeted ads. So I mean, through social media, through, I mean, even like subway billboards, we can target zip codes. Say we want younger generation, say like 24 to 35. We can target that very easily. So it's more expensive, but generally that's how people are marketing online these days. I would say that's kind of the bulk of our engagement. And that's, you know, a hard thing to do as an individual artist. It's not, I mean, we have the finances to be able to do that. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about is what to do if you're not a major arts organization with all this backing behind you. So one of the most important things is, I think, you know, music is, and performing arts is a business. You need to think about the product that you're offering. So, I mean, in terms of like art series, we know we have the performance, but for a first-time ballet goer, if they're just coming to see the ballet, that might not be so interested. They don't know the repertoire that's going to be that night. They are not sure of the dancers or the music. But when you have this other thing, so you can kind of create a night around it. So you go to this after party afterwards. It's really fun. And then you get to try something a little more experimental in terms of ballet, which is kind of interesting. We've noticed through our own research that younger audiences want more of an experience than just the straightforward content. So it's not like the older generations who can buy a subscription and make a night around coming to the Philharmonic, to the opera, to the ballet. And that's kind of it. Younger generations want a little more value added into this. So we're talking about like, you know, these after parties and these other like collaborations with artists. I mean, this is really important. Another thing I wanted to talk about is like social media and organic growth, because this is a great way for individual artists to make a name for themselves. I mean, we've seen it from like people on SoundCloud and TikTok. It's, I mean, probably a lot different than what some of you at the School of Music are doing, but like, it's an important lesson to take that like organically you can grow a following through these different social media avenues. So it's definitely something to look at. I mean, one of the ways that our dancers themselves like grow a name for themselves is through social media. I mean, a lot of our principal dancers have very large Instagram followings. They're hosting classes and different experiences for their Instagram followers, which is very large. And it's something that we've taken advantage of in COVID times, inviting people to take a look at our dancers' content through their own Instagram feeds. So that is kind of a segue into what we're doing now. As Kathleen said, it's very, I mean, we're in a difficult time. We don't have any ticket sales, which is a big issue. It's not, you know, a lot of our revenue does come from donations and things like that, but ticket sales generally make up a lot of our operational budget. So these are very important. And one of the most important things for the ballet has been to keep our audience engaged, to provide them content, things like that. So we've come out with a digital season. So we had our spring digital season in replace of our spring season that we didn't have. And luckily the ballet records all of our performances. We've had pretty robust recordings since pretty much the founding of our company. George Balanchine, our founding choreographer, was very adamant about recording performance, not only just for our dancers to look back on and to be able to grow, but also, you know, for solidarity in terms of our organization. So this has been a great asset. We have a lot of footage ranging, you know, we've back from like performances of A Midsummer's Night Dream from the 80s all the way up to some of our more recent like world premieres from this year. So that's been great. It's been completely free. And basically we provided this as a way to kind of keep ballet in people's lives. We knew that was important. We also had we did some research. I'm kind of losing my words a little bit. But we asked people what they thought about the streams, and overwhelmingly, people were incredibly enthusiastic. They loved seeing these older performances, especially ones they might have gone to before. They were able to relive again. And not just our, it wasn't just our normal, very engaged portion of patrons. It was people from all over the world that wouldn't have normally have a chance to go to our performances, which is a great way to build an audience. I mean, location's a big factor. If you can't get to New York City, you can't really go to a New York City ballet performance. So that was huge as well. Let's see. But one of the things that we've been considering, and I think I was kind of thinking of this based on what Kathleen said, is that we are thinking of ways to bring in revenue, which is a little hard. We've thought about monetizing digital streams and things like that. There are a lot of barriers considering their union contracts and things like that. So there are a lot of barriers, and I know I believe a lot of you know about the Mets recordings that you can see at like the Athena. Those are also very costly, but great ways to engage with an audience by providing, you know, beautifully shot Met performances right in Athens, Ohio. It's a great way to engage with an audience. So one of the things that I kind of want to end on is one of the most important things I think you can think of in these times that we're in is how to safely engage with an audience. So one of the biggest things, and one of the things I've seen most success with, is social media performance. So just hosting like YouTube Live, Facebook Live events has been big for anywhere between like, you know, us at New York City Ballet to like bands and other performers. It's been a huge get. But also, once you know we come out with a vaccine, one of the issues is that we don't know exactly when people will be comfortable coming back to a theater, since they'll be in a confined space. So thinking of ways to maybe have outdoor performances, or you know, reimagine what the performance looks like. I think that's one of the big questions and the big kind of question marks that's hanging over. So that's kind of what I'll end on, and I can, if anyone has any more pointed questions towards that, I can kind of try to answer that in the Q&A, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ami now.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you, Kathleen, for sharing your insights and experiences in your work in both fundraising as well as marketing. And Dr. Fisher, thank you so much for inviting us into this space to speak to bright and wonderful OU School of Music students. I've prepared a few words through storytelling about my work and experiences in working in arts administration and community programming. Hello, everyone. My name is Ami Sherson. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm calling you from Queens, New York on Lenape land. Like Kathleen and Eric, who spoke before me, I'm also an arts administrator. As I work in community programming, I constantly think about ways we can support our participants and constituents. Though much of my knowledge in arts administration came through my work in the field, there are many factors in my life that impact my strategies and community support today. So a little bit about me. I'm a second-generation American, the daughter of Chilean and Japanese immigrants. The arts were a really integral part of my life growing up, as both my parents were able to meet and communicate past language barriers through their love of music. This creative tool of expression allowed me to collaborate with my peers, learn from mentors I cherish to this day, and create spaces for critical conversation and so much more. I've always been fascinated about how the arts were able to bring people together and allow folks to be their fullest selves. So while I was in college, I began to investigate deeper into this. As a woman of color interested in the arts management field, I did not see many people in leadership positions who look like me. I struggled to find communities where I could speak about the experiences and prejudices I faced honestly, talk about my journey as an artist of color with people who understood my background, and people I could collaborate with to create change in the field. Though I knew I had the support and care from my friends, professors, and mentors, I was eager to find a specific community where I could find grounding and could be heard. When I was a junior in college, I finally found that sense of belonging. I had the opportunity to participate in the Diversity in Arts Leadership Internship in New York City, a program for undergraduate students underrepresented in the arts field to work in arts administration for a summer. There, I was surrounded with a group of brilliant students who had a deep love of the arts, who wanted to create more accessibility in the field, and truly cared for one another. We attended seminars led by arts leaders who spoke about how they overcame their difficulties they face as people of color. We shared meals together as we discussed our work and how we wanted to impact the field. We went to concerts together where we laughed and danced and celebrated our backgrounds and heritages. That summer, I learned the importance of what it means to feel grounded in unity and receive intentional support from my community. These are all experiences and opportunities that led me back to New York post-graduation, where I accepted a role at Americans for the Arts as the Equity and Arts Leadership Program Associate. Yes. So a little bit about AFTA and my work. AFTA is different from New York City Ballet and Washington National Opera because it is a service organization and it's not a performing organization. So we are a national arts service organization interested in creating and supporting all the arts for all the people. We're interested in the intersections of arts and health, arts and business, arts and economy, arts and education. I could literally go on for days. We provide research and support for our broader arts communities, educational resources to further expand the arts and cultivate new knowledge in the field, and spaces for our constituents to network and collaborate to accomplish personal and organizational goals. So my team specifically, the Strategic Impact Team, we're interested in breaking barriers and expanding arts management opportunities to those historically underrepresented in the arts field. So this includes folks of color, folks who identify on the LGBTQIA+ spectrum, people with disabilities, people from lower income households, etc. So some of the ways that we're able to do this is through publishing research and articles on cultural equity related topics. A quick plug for an article that my team and I are going to publish in the wintertime. We wrote about the importance of paid internship programs in creating cultural equity in the arts field. I will share that out once that it is published. We also create educational opportunities through online professional development sessions, such as our webinar series, the Dial Labs, as well as Dial Studio, which are all free on our website. Again, another plug. And finally, creating programming that focuses on intentional community development. One of the programs I coordinate is, you guessed it, the Diversity in Arts Leadership Internship Program. As this program has impacted my career development, I hope to continue to create opportunities for students of color in the arts field. Programs like these have a major impact in our field, especially in our 28-year-long history, as almost 40% of our DIAL alumni have stated that they have managerial roles or above in arts administration. We also lead a program targeted towards emerging and mid-career leaders called the Arts and Culture Leaders of Color Fellowship Program. Based out in the Midwest, we support groundbreaking and innovative leaders of color with a curriculum built to guide them through their career journeys. So we are already in our second year, and we've seen fellow gain promotions, make bold career shifts, as well as give back to their arts communities. So communities are not just groups of people that are together. There are webs of people connected by similar interests and ideas with the goal and intention of supporting one another. How do you all define a community? I'm a huge fan of audience participation, so I'm gonna ask y'all to do a little exercise for me, and we will all navigate together to the School of Music Facebook page, where I will ask you to use the comment section of the post. I want you to think about 3 groups of communities that you feel heard in or feel grounded in. This could be your music studio, your friend group, your colleagues at work, religious affiliations, and even the people in your 6 a.m. yoga class. I want you to take time to think about those 3 and feel comfortable. Please put them out in the chat box. We'll see if this works and if people feel comfortable. But since I have my lovely panelists with me, I will turn that question over to y'all. What are 3 communities that you find a lot of grounding in right now?
I gotta say, the big one for me has been the cycling community in New York. I've had a couple of crashes so far, but it's been really like welcoming, and I mean, it's great to like be in a group and feel safe on the road. So that's been big for me. The OU Alumni Network in New York is fantastic. It's very much community, very much engaged. So that's another one of those communities that I'm a part of that I feel very welcome to. I mean, even in a weird way, like my apartment / house, I live with 3 other people. So we have our own little, I mean, we don't go out that much. So we have our own little community now, and it's, you know, it's nice. It's very welcoming. And we all try to make it work here.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. And I'm sorry about those crashes. I hope you healed healthily
It's
and
okay.
well.
I'm all right.
What about you, Kathleen?
Yeah, so the first thing that came to mind is during this COVID times, I've really taken this opportunity to reconnect with some friends who, particularly friends who are in the arts management world, so that we can commiserate, share, talk amongst each other about what's going on in our jobs, what's going on in our lives, what sort of strategies our organizations are employing, and, you know, bounce ideas off of each other. So that's the first one that came to mind. The second one came to mind is slightly more superficial, but I learned how to knit recently, which is a big deal for me. And as a result, I have made like a new knitting friend who has kind of like mentoring me through knitting a little bit. And so that is a little bit of an unexpected community that I didn't have prior to COVID, but one that I'm taking great solace from, I suppose. And I'm still thinking about my third. So I need a couple more seconds to think about that.
No worries. Thank you both so much for sharing these communities that mean a lot to you, whether they are professional or growth-based or even based on hobbies. I hope that folks have also picked their three. I don't see any in the chat box, but we can move forward and do this activity anyways. So as we've now named groups of communities that are important to us, let's think about how we cultivate and support these groups. So I want y'all to think about some challenges that your communities might have faced recently, whether that be finding connection and unity via your Zoom classes during this pandemic, preparing for graduate school or the job search, or feeling that your community is not being represented. So you don't have to type this out, but think about some challenges your collective communities are facing right now, and I'll give the audience a little bit of time to think about it. Love silence. I love silence. Okay, so then now today, I want you all to think about ways you can continue to think past challenges and create solutions and innovations to be there for your communities. Ways you can foster belonging, build strength, and cultivate truth amongst each other. Thoughtful community support should be a pillar in the arts field no matter what sector you are in. This could look like a music educator creating space for students to communicate their accessibility needs to support healthy learning environments, a music therapist taking the time to get to know their patients and participants and playing songs they'd like to hear, a performance selecting repertoire that is inclusive and representative of people of color and women when deciding on music for a recital. These are just some ways we can begin to think about how we can find unity and empathy in the work that we do to strengthen our greater arts communities. As I've applied in my own life and career, I hope you all continue to think about how you can show up for one another, create change in your field, and build upon the web you are creating right now as music students. Communities are not only those you join or grow in, they're the ones that you continue to build. Please feel free to stay connected with me. My email is ashirsen@artsusa.org or via my LinkedIn. Thank you so much for giving us the space and time, and I look forward to being part of your communities.
Thank you all so much for those wonderful comments and inspiring presentations. I'm checking the chat here. I don't think we have any comments. If students are still with us and you would like to put a comment or a question in that chat, we'll hang on for just a few moments and try to have those answered. All right, let's see, a few more coming in here. Keep refreshing this. Responses to your questions there on me. Great.
Great.
May I ask a question of one of my fellow panelists?
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Eric, so coming from the performing organization side of things, how did you all handle your cancellations with your patrons over like this past spring or any summer performances were canceled? Did you give them options to donate tickets, to gift certificates, to roll their subscriptions forward? What did that look like? And for perspective, a lot of performing arts organizations are kind of grappling with these questions of how to make donors and ticket buyers feel like they can be still connected with the organization when performances are canceled. So how do you like keep them coming back or ask them to continue to support the organization? So Eric, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we provided a couple of options. So option number one, you could donate all of your tickets for spring season back to us, which actually was one of the most popular options, which was, I mean, incredible.
That's great.
Our audience is fantastic. They really care about the ballet and would love to see us continue to flourish even in times like this. We also offered to keep the money, as we say, on account. So all of the value of your subscription, your tickets for the spring season could be rolled over to another season. So you say you can use it for, I mean, whenever we have performances again, I'll just say that. But these are some of the options that, and you could also get a refund. So this is one of the rare options that we do offer a complete refund.
And if patrons opted for the refund, was there any follow-up that your organization did in order to try to re-engage them or try to like direct their engagement into a different stream?
as far as I can say from a marketing standpoint, we do keep these people engaged. So, I mean, say if like a subscriber were to refund, we would still keep them in the same channels. So they're still, I mean, to kind of give you an example of how we did this. So say from an emails perspective, we came out with a newsletter that was pretty much weekly at the time that would keep people up to date with what our dancers were doing, kind of ballet behind the scenes, different classes we were offering, if we were in our digital season, what was on that week. So we tried to keep people engaged in that way, mostly online. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Actually, Kathleen, there's a question for you in the chat. Harrison asks, I plan on being a band director at a rural public school where state federal funding has been declining over the last several years. I know it's much smaller scale than what you do, but do you have any advice for fundraising at that local level and for keeping the community involved, perhaps drawing attention to our program that could bring some of that state funding back?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Harrison. That's a great question. So the first thing that I would do if I were you is to kind of do an assessment of the landscape. So what is currently happening in your community, whether that's within the band program, at the school level, at the district level, or at the community level, that there might be systems already set up in place to help you with this sort of thing. So I know a lot of school districts have like band booster programs or PTAs that part of their mission and part of their job is to support these sorts of things. So I would kind of go with the low-hanging fruit first. But then I would encourage you to think outside the box. People get really excited about new and innovative things, and just kind of thinking about how you can bring people along for the ride. So as Ami has mentioned, as Eric has mentioned, it's all about really communication and that storytelling and making people understand kind of the heart of what you're trying to do and the mission of what you're trying to do. So I would really encourage you to think about yourself as a storyteller, and you're trying to explain the story of why music is important, why band is important at that local level, but also at the state level. So just be thinking about how you can kind of pull those threads of storytelling and how you can best relate to the people that are like making those decisions. And just for everyone, I mean, policy is so important at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level. And in arts organizations all across the United States, we're feeling the effect of like federal policy, state, local policy all the time. And so I would just encourage you, like as a band director, to really think about the importance of what may seem small, like district-wide policy, but how you can affect change there that can lead to bigger change down the road. It's all so important.
Another quick question. Thank you so much, Kathleen. How has the job market through your organizations changed since the pandemic? Have you been able to keep everyone employed? Have they been given different positions? And how has this impacted your revenue and fundraising?
I can go first. It's been really hard. I'll be honest. It's been really hard since the pandemic hit. So at the Kennedy Center more broadly, we've had sweeping furloughs and have had layoffs across the Kennedy Center. With the Washington National Opera specifically, we've had a number of our staff laid off. We're currently operating at 56% of our pre-pandemic full-time staff. And that is as the result of layoffs and furloughs. There was one point at the beginning of the furlough period where I was fortunate enough to not be furloughed. There was one period where I was the out of office message for 30 of my colleagues, which gives you an idea of like the scope of what happened. So it has just been really devastating. The center is currently in a hiring freeze, so we're not hiring for any positions for folks that have left during the pandemic or that we were in the process of hiring for when the pandemic hit. I will say from the fundraising side of things, we have been remarkably fortunate that our donor base has stuck with us. We revised our fundraising goal down slightly when the pandemic hit, and the close of our fiscal year was just this past Monday, and we made our end of year goal, which is incredible. But it takes all of those things that I was talking about earlier, those donor engagement, that audience engagement, to meet those sorts of goals. It was hard work though, and I know not all organizations, were able to meet their end of year goals there, but it just really underscores what we talked about today, about that storytelling, about getting people to understand what's important about what we're presenting.
Thank you. Eric?
Yeah, my organization has been very similar. In fact, most organizations on Lincoln Center's campus have kind of had similar outcomes. Although I will say that the ballet has been fortunate enough to be financially pretty well run. So we kept everyone employed, including artists, paid through the end of our spring season like we normally would. So up until May 31st. But like everyone else, we've had furloughs, we've had some layoffs. We do have a hiring freeze, and that's just kind of the nature of the market right now, unfortunately. Luckily, I've been in a good position with the company, but that's just it's unfortunate, but it's how it is. We've had our own what we're calling our relief fund, so this is our specific kind of bucket for donations. A lot of individual donations coming through that way, but it's been a very successful campaign. So we're kind of at this point we're looking forward to when we can put on performances again, and we're going to try to get sales going in anticipation of that, but still kind of holding for the time being.
Thank you. Ami?
Yes, so Americans for the Arts is a arts service and research organization. So actually during the height of the pandemic, we were very busy conducting research studies and really supporting our broader communities. With that, we did not have any furloughs or firings, though we are currently at a hiring freeze. A lot of our earned revenue does come from our research, our webinars, as well as in-person events such as national convenings and conventions. And so because we're not able to meet in person, those parts of the earned revenue have diminished, but we're able to continue to engage with our constituents virtually. All of our programs have resumed online. Actually, the DAO program that I mentioned, we were able to move everything virtually, and all the interns were able to keep their stipends, and we were even able to support our arts organizations in covering their stipends to make sure that our program wasn't a financial burden on them. So I think on Americans for the Arts side, it's been how do we support our broader communities and kind of paying attention and continue to kind of research the field. So it's really great to hear the perspective of Eric and Kathleen in this as well.
Definitely. I'm just so looking forward to the day when we can all come together for live concerts. Can you imagine what an experience this is going to be? So something certainly to look forward to for all of us. Let me do one more quick check here to see if we have any other questions. I don't believe we do. I just want to say, again, a special thank you to all three of our panelists. It has been an absolute pleasure to see you all again and to hear about the amazing things that you're doing. We are so proud of you, and we hope that our students will continue to connect with you if that's possible. If questions come through in the future, we hope that you'll continue to engage with this Facebook page. I think I just saw another question come through. So hopefully we can continue the conversation, and very best wishes to you. And thank you so much for spending the afternoon with us today.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank
Thanks,
you so
everyone.
much.
Be well, everyone.